On today's show, NBA Eastern Conference play-in stock watch. Which teams from the play-in tournament this past season will rise or fall in the standings this upcoming year? The Indiana Pacers, the Atlanta Hawks, the Miami Heat, Toronto Raptors, and so much more. Which teams are you buying, selling, or holding stock of going into this season? It's all coming up right here at Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready for the NFL season with incredible offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets back guaranteed. Plus, all customers who bet $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use, and you can be on everything from spreads to player props and so much more. Right now, we can take a look at the outright betting favorites for Super Bowl 58. The Kansas City Chiefs leading the way at plus 600, the Eagles at plus 800, and then rounding out the top five, if the Buffalo Bills at plus 900, and the Bengals and the 49ers at plus 1,000 points apiece. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with an offer you do not want to miss out on. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Joining us now is the host of Locked On Nets, Adam Armbrecht, who you can track down wherever you listen to your podcasts and on YouTube. Just search Locked On Nets. Here for part 2 of our Eastern Conference playoffs stock watch. We made it through the top 6 seeds of the Eastern Conference from this past season, evaluating whether we're buying, selling, or holding on their win total stock and where those teams might land in the Eastern Conference this upcoming season. And we had a couple teams that are maybe poised for a fall in the standings with the Philadelphia 76ers and the Brooklyn Nets, as conventional wisdom would have it. But that means we got to take a look at the play-in bracket, Adam. So as we went through our last segment talking about this, we had the Bucks, Celtics, Sixers, Cavs, Knicks, and Nets, who were seeds 1 through 6 this past year. Potentially the Sixers and Nets falling out of that bracket, which means teams in that next bracket have to be poised to make a breakthrough. So the first that we're going to get to, the Atlanta Hawks, 41-41 this past season. Their current win total prediction, 41.5 games. Not a whole bunch of difference. I mean, I think I kind of have to hold on the Hawks stock. I don't think they've done anything. I don't think they've done enough for me to feel overwhelmingly confident about them moving further up the pecking order quite just yet.
No, I think it makes sense. I think the win total makes sense. Like, total hedge. Can't really say that they've moved the needle one way or the other for themselves. And they are still fundamentally a team. You know, they pick up DeJounte Murray a season ago. Then you still have Trae Young there. Like, it still is the same relative core. And that core has relatively underperformed. So it's hard for me to raise them too high above the expectations where they are right now. And they are an enigma to me. Honestly, they are going to be one of the most fascinating teams, I think, at the start of the season to watch, to see if their stock is actually trending up or potentially going in the other direction pretty quickly, and some real blow up moves for that organization.
The Hawks could go either way, right? They could be one of the like lightning in the bottle teams of the NBA, where with that electric backcourt, I mean, they could easily surprise a lot of people and be in that top 6 of the Eastern Conference, but they could also have a lot that just goes wrong for them, and maybe the pieces don't ever quite click between Trae Young and DeJounte Murray in the backcourt. You're right. I'm right there with you on the Hawks. I'm going to hold because I don't know what to make of them either. Now, this next team I feel like is a very easy buy option here after their finals run. The Miami Heat finished this last year at 44-38. Their win total prediction is 48.5 games this upcoming year. I think relative to expectations, I think I'm buying their stock for sure.
Yeah, you have to buy their stock because they constantly, if whatever you buy them at, it always sells for higher later. Like, that is generally the pattern for the Miami Heat over the last couple of seasons. Now, interestingly enough, though, when you come to the win totals for the year, I might take the under on that, just because Miami, as much as any team in the NBA, is a team that is about the playoffs. They're not concerned with what they're doing during the regular season. They want to get there. They're a veteran heavy team. Obviously, there's this big looming factor about Damian Lillard. And if you want to maybe think about it proactively, you could say, oh, take the over because that's going to happen at some point. But this is a team that I think, again, is destined to be in the playoffs, destined to be probably a higher seed, and ultimately is going to be far closer to what they were making to the finals last year than what you see here being almost missing the play-in tournament and being on the outside looking in.
I think the Heat give us our first viable option of last year's play-in bracket part of the standings, where we can look at the Heat and say that's probably one of the teams jumping into the top 6 if you've got Philly and or possibly the Nets falling out of the top 6 of the playoff bracket out there.
Oh yeah, for sure. Right. You have to just, again, the talent is there. The resume of playoff success is there, and they've played the best teams. When you come in as an 8th seed in last year's playoffs, you have to take on the best seeds in the playoffs for the East. They did that, rose to the task. You have some things happen with other rosters and injuries, et cetera. It doesn't matter. You beat those teams, you go to the finals. They're easily the team that I would say jumps up into the top 6.
All right, next team we've got on our bracket, the Chicago Bulls, who finished the year at 40-42. Their win total prediction, 36.5. I think at this point I've got to sell Bulls stock.
Who got to sell on the Bulls? They're running it back. They're running it back with a roster that miserably failed last year to achieve its goal. I was shocked. This came out very early this offseason, right? Like, the Bulls are committed, they're bringing back the boys, and they're going to go back into this well again. Now, they're going to have flexibility beyond this year, so I think it sets up for them to make changes. But how could you buy a team that was 40-42 with the on paper names? They're not good enough. Yeah, I can see them tumbling actually potentially out of those top 10 seeds, depending on how a couple other rosters play out.
Ooh, bigger potential tumble, the Bulls or the 76ers at this point?
76ers, because you can get the Miami Heat get up in there, the Knicks, the Cavs. So Sixers, I could see them falling from 3 to 6 and still being in the playoff picture. The Bulls, they maybe only tumble to 10. Maybe they tumble even to 11 and get eliminated. But like positionally, I think the Sixers are poised for potentially a bigger fall. But if you're talking about missing the playoffs, I think the Bulls could be on the outside looking in very easily.
I think I fully have to agree with you there. Now that I'm looking back at the math of it, like I was thinking, but then I started looking at the actual totals and I was like, you know what, just sheer numbers wise, Bulls, aren't able to fall quite as far as the Sixers are. Again, I don't know if there's another team in the NBA that has the chance to fall quite as far as the Sixers do. We're just looking at just sheer numbers. The last team that managed to make the cut though this past season, the Toronto Raptors, a team that finished at 41-41. Their win total prediction, 36.5 as well. Yet another team where we're going to have to agree here, Adam. Are we selling? I think we're selling.
Are you holding? It makes sense to. I consider the idea of holding, but I'll be honest with you, that probably would have been predicated on if you still had Nick Nurse, because I think that he gave you something extra, right? Because every year, relative to what their roster looked like, you would look at Toronto and say, yeah, okay, like maybe they could make some noise, and they always relatively overachieve. That slowly started to dip off here on the back end. You talk about losing Fred VanVleet, replacing him with Dennis Schroeder. That's not a knock on Dennis, but he's not Fred VanVleet. Like it just, again, and there was already the rumblings about could Pascal Siakam be a trade target for other teams. I think this team and this roster is very volatile coming into this year. They have a lot of young guys, and they're ready to start to turn things over to another era of their basketball there. It's just gonna be a matter of when, not if.
Yeah, and whenever you hit that transitional phase where you're ready to kind of enter that next era, sometimes there's a bit of that speed bump along the way where you falter a little bit. You're gonna, it's the NBA life cycle, right? It's cyclical. You're gonna go around and around, and sometimes you're at the top of the NBA life cycle and things are good. You've got championships, and then eventually you find yourself on the bottom of the scrap heap, and that's not always the most fun when you're on that side of things.
Oh, of course not, man. I mean, but and it's funny too. I mean, obviously as a net-centric guy, we in theory had the highest of highs when it came to having Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden, and the possibilities of that. Never reached those ultimate goals. But I think fans sometimes they lose sight of that, right? If you want to always be competitive, always be in the playoffs, which the Toronto Raptors have been consistently as an organization, you get blindsided by the idea of, you could drop 6 wins in one season, find yourself on the outside, and you come right back. But you have to prepare yourself to at least have that step back year before you get yourself reset on solid ground.
Now, we had a couple teams in there, both throughout, obviously, with the Sixers, who could completely just not even make the playoffs this next season. They could experience an incredible fall here. There are a handful of teams that didn't actually make the cut this past season. I think when you look at the teams left over out of the Eastern Conference who are poised to maybe make a jump and actually make it to the playoffs this next year, Adam, I mean, I'm inclined to go with the Magic and Pacers personally as my two teams that I'm very interested in buying stock in, that I think are actually going to be in the play-in discussion this next year. Where are you going?
Yeah, Pacers, I think if we're talking also like net centric, like these are, I think, the two teams that are in a very kind of similar spot. They have talent. Their rosters are going in the right direction if you take away championship aspirations. So the Pacers, I'm excited to watch them because I think that they've done some nice things here. They're ready maybe. Now, again, you're only a 35-win team last year, so you're going to have to pick up 7-8 wins along the way. The Orlando Magic as well. I think they're right in that same type of wheelhouse, and they're the only teams to me that functionally look like, based on, and Washington obviously takes a big tumble out of there getting rid of Beal. The Hornets, they're perpetually a mess. And the Pistons, who talk to me like in 2 years, and I'm talking about what the Pistons could become potentially. But I think Pacers and the Magic, and honestly, I won't be shocked if the Magic come up short. I actually think Pacers are the team that sneaks into that conversation for playing game. Maybe the only big switch here for me for the teams that didn't make it last year.
Oh, so you're going Raptors over Magic as Magic barely miss it?
Maybe the Bulls don't make it. Maybe the Bulls fall out of there, and So yeah, there could be a couple of different ways here. But again, like if you looked at it right now, and this is always the fun part, talk about the back end. So like Toronto, at least on paper right now, they are a more talented and certainly a more experienced roster than the Orlando Magic.
Yeah.
So you'd have to convince me that either something's going to change again beyond Fred VanVleet for Toronto that takes them back another step, and that we see the steps forward for a couple of key guys when it comes to the Orlando Magic. They didn't do certain things in their backcourt in terms of moving off of a very crowded room right now following their draft class. Maybe that's something that happens here that helps strengthen them. But when you have Markelle Fultz and Gary Harris and now Anthony Black, and you still have Cole Anthony, and Jalen Suggs, it's just, there's a lot of bodies in there, and they're not all going to get functional minutes, and they're not going to get you over the hump when it comes to win. So I need to see one more tweak from that roster, maybe specifically in that backcourt, and then I could see them jumping in.
How do the standings ultimately shake out in the Eastern Conference? Which teams are poised to take a jump either from the play-in bracket into the top 6, or from not making the playoffs into that play-in bracket and start flirting with some deep playoff runs themselves? You're going to have us covered for all of that and more over at Locked On Nets. Adam, I appreciate you stopping by Locked On NBA with me.
Anytime.